For decades, there's been this one number that has practically achieved mythical status when it comes to retirement planning: 4%. But as we're about to dig into in this explainer from UpNexus USA, what if the very rule that was designed to make you feel safe is actually, well, holding your retirement hostage? We are going to get into all the details, so you'll want to stick around. And hey, before we really jump in, if you get something out of these deep dives, please do us a huge favor and subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and definitely drop a comment to let us know what you think. And a really fantastic way to support what we do here is by checking out our coloring books. They're perfect for kids, grandkids, or even for adults who just need to relax a bit. You can find the link right down in the description or just use the QR code you see on the screen. Seriously, your support means we can keep making more explainers just like this one. Okay, let's get into it. For so many of us, the 4% rule feels like it's written in stone, right? You withdraw 4%, you adjust it for inflation, and boom, you're set for life. But this super simple instruction is hiding a much more complicated and honestly, a way more interesting reality. The story behind this number, it shows that its safety comes at a really steep price. And I'm not just talking about dollars and cents. I'm talking about a price measured in experiences, in opportunities, in the freedom to really enjoy the money you worked so hard for. We're about to unpack exactly why this so-called safest rule might actually be the riskiest one of all for your lifestyle. All right, so let's just make sure we're all on the same page. The rule itself, it's beautifully simple. Let's imagine you retire with $1 million portfolio, nice and round. In that first year, you take out $40,000, that's your 4%. Now, the next year, let's say inflation was 3%, you take out $41,200. The year after that, you adjust that number for inflation. And here's the key thing people sometimes miss. You basically throw the 4% part away after that first year. It's not 4% of your new balance. It becomes a fixed dollar amount that just gets a little cost of living bump each year. It's a set it and forget it kind of deal, and that's exactly why it became the foundation of retirement planning for millions of people.
And the psychology behind why this got so popular is just fascinating. A study from Morningstar really nails it. This strategy gives you this steady, predictable income that feels just like a paycheck, and that is incredibly comforting after you've spent your whole life earning a salary. You don't have to wake up, see that the market is tanking, and wonder, oh my gosh, do I need to spend less this month? Nope. When stocks are down 20%, your plan doesn't change one bit. You still get that same inflation-adjusted paycheck. It just removes all that emotional stress and that burden of having to make big decisions when things are volatile. And that is a huge, huge draw for retirees who just want stability above everything else. It's like an emotional security blanket, and that's a really powerful thing.
Now, to really get why this rule has limits, we have to go back to where it all started. Back in 1994, a financial planner named William Bengen published this really groundbreaking study. But we have to understand what his goal was. This is so important. He wasn't looking for the best withdrawal rate, or even the average one. No, he was literally stress testing history. He looked at every possible 30-year retirement period, starting all the way back in 1926, with a basic 50-50 portfolio of stocks and bonds. And he was only asking one question: what is the absolute highest starting withdrawal rate that could have made it through every single one of those historical periods, including the Great Depression and the crazy inflation of the 1970s?
And right here, this is where the whole story just flips on its head. This quote is from Bill Bengen himself. He studied hundreds and hundreds of hypothetical retirees. And that 4% number, the one that became the gospel, it was only necessary for one of them, the one person who had the absolute worst luck in the history of the stock market. Just let that sink in for a second. When you follow this rule, you are basically planning your entire retirement as if you are guaranteed to have the worst timing of anyone in the last 100 years. Bengen himself calls it very, very pessimistic. And when the guy who created the rules says that, we should probably pay attention. So who was this one unlucky person? Let's meet them. They retired in 1966, and right out of the gate, they got slammed by something called sequence of returns risk. So what's that? Well, imagine trying to climb a ladder, but the first couple of rungs are broken. If you get hit with bad market returns right at the beginning of retirement, your portfolio takes a huge knock right at the start, and that makes it incredibly hard to recover. This person's portfolio was shrinking because they were taking money out and because of a bear market at the exact same time. Then the 1970s hit, and with them came brutal, high inflation. And remember, the rule says you have to increase your withdrawal to keep up. So as the price of everything went through the roof, they were forced to pull out bigger and bigger chunks of money from their already wounded portfolio. After 30 years of this absolute perfect storm, their money did last, but it was pretty much running on fumes by the finish line.
So here's the bottom line. The 4% rule isn't really a strategy. It's a survival plan. A survival plan for a single catastrophic scenario. It's kind of like equipping your car with propellers and a parachute, just on the off chance you drive off a cliff into the middle of the ocean. Yeah, you're prepared for the worst thing you can possibly imagine, but it's completely over-engineered and unnecessarily expensive for the hundreds of other times where things turned out just fine. Planning your entire retirement around this one rule is choosing to live your life as if you're destined to have the absolute worst luck possible. And the real cost of that rigid, play-it-safe approach is where the story gets really personal. The promise of the 4% rule is rock-solid security. But the reality, for almost everyone who follows it, is something else entirely. And those are Bill Bengen's own words again. A huge pile of money and a huge pile of regrets. See, the vast majority of the time, following this rule just means you don't actually use the money you saved. You live more frugally than you have to, you put off the big trips, you hold back on being generous with your family, all to protect against this worst-case scenario that almost never actually happens. Okay, this number is it's stunning when you first hear it. According to Bengen's own research, if you look at all the different retirees over the last century, the average safe withdrawal rate wasn't 4%. It was just over 7%. Now, of course, some people needed less, and some really lucky retirees could have taken out 8, 9, maybe even 10%, but the average was 7. This one number just perfectly highlights the massive gap between the worst-case scenario and what typically happens. The difference between a 4% and a 7% withdrawal rate, that's the difference between needing to save 25 times your annual expenses versus only needing about 14 times. It completely rewrites the retirement math. It could mean retiring years earlier or just living a much, much richer life when you do retire. So let's just stop for a second and redefine what we mean by risk. For decades, financial planning has told us that risk is running out of money. But there's another risk, a much more subtle one, the risk of not actually living the life you planned for, the risk of passing away with a huge portfolio balance and a list of things you wish you had done. Just imagine saving diligently for 40 years, dreaming of traveling the world, only to spend your retirement too scared to book the plane tickets because the market dipped. The 4% rule is obsessed with eliminating that first risk, but in doing so, it massively increases the second one. For most people, it prioritizes keeping the money over enjoying your life. Okay, so if 4% isn't the answer, then what is? Is it 4.7%, 5%? The truth is, there is no new magic number that's just going to replace the old one. The real solution is a total shift in our mindset. It's about moving away from a rigid, unchanging rule and moving toward a dynamic, flexible plan that can actually adapt to reality, both the reality of your life and the reality of the markets. It's about building a real strategy, not just blindly following a static number. This quote from Morningstar's big study on this topic just captures the fundamental trade-off perfectly. It's at the heart of all of this. You can have a perfectly stable, predictable, paycheck-like income in retirement. You can. But the cost for that stability is a lower total amount of money you get to spend over your lifetime. If you want to maximize what you can spend, you have to be okay with some bumps in the road, some fluctuations from year to year. There's no free lunch here. The key is to stop looking for a single, safe number and start thinking about where you personally feel comfortable on that spectrum between total stability and maximum spending. So let's look at how we can build a better approach. Instead of just one rule, think of it like a toolkit with different strategies. Fixed rule, that's our old friend, the 4% rule. Now look at skip inflation. This is a really subtle but powerful change. If your portfolio loses money one year, you just skip your inflation raise the next year. You don't cut your spending, you just don't increase it. This tiny little tweak gives your portfolio some crucial breathing room to recover when the market is down. Then you have guardrails. This one's a bit more involved, but it's incredibly powerful. You set a range for your withdrawal rate, maybe between 4 and 6%. If a bad market pushes your withdrawal rate above 6%, you just take a modest 10% spending cut. So if you were spending $50,000 a year, you dial it back to $45,000. And on the flip side, if great returns cause your rate to drop below 4%, you give yourself a 10% raise, up to $55,000. It's a much more engaged, responsive way to manage your retirement income. And you know what makes these flexible strategies so smart? They work with our human nature, not against it. Think about it. When you see scary headlines about the economy or you log in and see your portfolio balance has dropped, what's your first gut reaction? It's probably to be a little more careful with your money, right? Maybe you put off buying that new gadget or you eat out a little less. A good retirement plan shouldn't try to fight that instinct. It should just formalize it. It creates a structured, rational way to do what we'd probably do anyway, and that prevents you from panicking while still letting you make smart adjustments that protect your money for the long haul. So, this all brings us to the most important question of all. We've taken apart the myth of the one single universal safe number. So now the job is to figure out what's safe and what's appropriate for your specific, unique life. The answer isn't a number you're going to find in some study, it's a number you figure out based on your own life, your goals, and your personal comfort level. There are really 4 key levers you can pull when you're designing your own plan. First, your time horizon. How long does your money actually need to last? Are you 65 and planning for 25 years? Or are you 45 and planning for 50 years? As we're about to see, that changes everything. Second, your flexibility. Could you handle a 5 or 10% change in your spending from one year to the next? Or do you need that absolute rock-solid predictability to sleep at night? Third, your goals. Is your main goal to see the world and spend freely, or is leaving a big inheritance to your kids a top priority for you? And finally, your income floor. This one's critical. If your essential bills, your housing, food, healthcare, are already paid for by things like Social Security or a pension, then your portfolio is just for the fun stuff. And that means you can afford to be way more flexible with it. This chart just brilliantly shows the power of that first variable, time. The 4% rule is famously based on a 30-year retirement. But let's be real, not everyone's retirement is going to last exactly 30 years. Look at what happens when you change that timeline. If you retire later and you only need your money to last for, say, 15 or 20 years, a 5% or even 6% withdrawal rate has historically been totally safe. That is a massive difference in your lifestyle. But on the other hand, if you're part of the early retirement movement and you're planning for a 50-year retirement, you need to be more conservative, maybe closer to 3.8%. This one chart alone just proves why a one-size-fits-all rule is so ridiculous. Your retirement length is one of the biggest factors in what you can sustainably spend. All right, let's bring this all together into a simple, actionable framework, kind of based on Morningstar's approach. Just ask yourself these 3 questions. First, what do you need versus what do you want? Separate your essential must-pay bills from all the discretionary fun spending. Second, be really honest with yourself about your emotional tolerance for change. If the very idea of a spending cut, even a tiny one, gives you anxiety, then a strategy that leans towards stability is probably for you. If you just see it as a logical tweak, then you can handle more flexibility. And third, what is your ultimate goal for this money? Are you trying to spend your last dollar on your last day, or is passing on wealth to the next generation a core part of your plan? Your answers to these questions are what will guide you to the right kind of strategy for you. So here's the big takeaway. Your retirement plan should empower you, not trap you. The 4% rule, when you treat it like this unbreakable law, can really feel like a financial prison. It can lock you into a level of spending that's way lower than what you could probably afford. A modern, effective retirement plan, it's a living thing. It's a dynamic tool that gives you a framework for making smart decisions as your life changes and as the market changes. It gives you the freedom to actually live the life you spent a lifetime saving for. And so we'll end with this question. Instead of asking, can I follow the 4% rule? A much more powerful question is, what rule, or maybe better yet, what strategy am I going to design for myself? You are the author of your own retirement story. By understanding these trade-offs between stability and spending, and by being really honest about your own goals and your own personality, you can go from being a passive rule follower to being the active architect of a retirement that's not just financially secure, but also deeply, deeply fulfilling. Thanks so much for watching this explainer from Up Next is USA. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, you can support the channel by checking out our coloring books in the description below. We'll see you in the next one.